Hi, amateur mechanic Al here, wanting to pass on some of the key learnings that I had in my attempt to replace the neutral safety switch, which is this unit here on the transmission of my R107 model of the Mercedes. It's a 1983 500 SL, so those of you that know these cars, that's a gray market car, so not everything is exactly the same on all these 107s that were US imported. It's an automatic transmission, left side steering, but what started me on this was a sloppy shifting in the gear shift, and found that there was a easy fix to that, that the gear shift nylon bushings at either end of the gear shift rod, either at the transmission, which is what this piece is, or back at the gear shift itself, where the shift rod comes down and the shift, another nylon bushing fits on this. So replacing those turned out to be a real pain in the butt, basically because the exhaust system is in the way, to the point where it wouldn't shift, wouldn't start, because the neutral safety switch, which is the purpose of it, is to only allow the starter to engage when the gear shift is in park or neutral, so that you're not starting the starter motor while the car's in gear. So this is both mechanical shifting and electrical shifting that goes on. So let me show you how it's supposed to work with this mock-up on the bench, because other places on the internet that talk about this usually say, I can't show you good pictures because it's so tight to get into, and that certainly is the case. So I've mocked it up here. Okay, to describe how this neutral safety switch is supposed to work, this is the new one that I have, and I've mounted it on my workbench just to give you an idea of how it's supposed to work. So this is a rod that comes out of the transmission, and this rotates to shift the gears. This is the electrical connection that has a disc cap that allows the shift mechanism to know when the gear shift is in neutral or park, or reverse is the other thing. So it's would be mounted like this on the transmission, bolted in place, and then the electrical connection is done by this little keystone. Let me take this off. This keystone keyhole has to fit on here in order to make the electrical switch work. So as the gear shift goes, if you remember, the park is all the way forward on the gear shift in the console. You pull it back, that is pushing this rod forward, and so it'll push it forward like this. And so that's the park, neutral, reverse, well, no, park, reverse, neutral, and then the other gears. So that, when this is clamped down on the shaft, that rotates the transmission internal gearing and mechanically does that. So the electrical is something else again. Let me give a connection here with my wires. This is a multimeter, and all it is checking resistance, and has a little beep on it if the resistance is 0. I don't know if you can hear that, but perhaps you can see the meter. So when the gear shift is in park, these two pins know that and allow the starter to engage. If it's in reverse, that won't start. But these two pins are engaged. if I get it exactly in reverse, and wiggling that around a bit, you see that that allows the backup lights to come on when the car is in reverse. Further forward is neutral, and the neutral again allows the starter to engage. So that's the electrical and the mechanical connections that define what this neutral safety switch is supposed to do. And note that this mounts to the lower part of the transition, just above the oil pan of the transmission, and the front of the car is here and the oil pan is down here, and this is the upward part. So all of this is on the driver's side of the transmission, and very difficult to get to. Next, I want to share with you some of the tricks I learned in getting the old neutral safety switch, which is this one, out of the car. The first thing you have to do is get up to this bolt that holds the shift lever onto the transmission rotating shaft, and you loosen this. These are 10mm nuts, a bolt head and a nut, and both are 10mm, and you have to have a nut or a wrench on both sides in order to get it out. There's a flat washer on the inside and a bolt and the nut, and you have to remove the whole thing because this shaft pins a little indent in the transmission shaft, and so just loosening this won't allow you to slip it off this way. You have to pull that whole thing out, and then you can slip this part off. Next is getting the neutral safety switch off. To undo the connector, this rotates clockwise about 30 degrees, and then that releases the connector and it can be pried off. To lock it when you're putting the new one in, you rotate it and that locks the connector in place. It's a disc with wires, the wire assembly as part of that. The other thing is that this is a 10mm head bolts that goes onto the transmission side, but unlike, well, it is a rather tight fit, so I had a very nice ratchet drive one, 10mm, but it's too big a head to fit around the head of the bolt. So I had to go to a simple box end and just get it loosened on either side. So there's two of these. You can sort of feel where this is, and it's right 12 o'clock above the connector on the one, and all forward, and the shaft is still there, so you can feel the connector. That bolt is about 10 o'clock versus that shaft. So getting it on that those two heads is pretty difficult because you're working blind. As I've thought through how I want to install this new neutral safety switch onto the car, I think I'll start by first trying to mount the neutral safety switch over the shaft on the transmission and find these two holes that these bolts will go through and into the mounting brackets. I gather that's rather hard to find, so with nothing else in place, that'll allow me a little more room to work and mount the neutral safety switch onto the transmission itself. After that, I will attach the connecting rod here and this bracket with the clip, so I don't have to try to do that once it's on the car, and then slip the the connecting rod and bracket over onto the transmission housing. It's very important then that this key fits into the keyway, that you can see this keyway, this keyhole has to fit over that for the mechanical shifting, and then connect to the electrical shifting or the electrical switching here. So there's a ridge here that fits into it, and then this hole. So that has to go on, and then I'll be putting on the bolt and washer and nut and tightening that down. Next, I'll push the connector disc into position, and do that with this rotating part on the the clockwise position as far as it goes. Push it in, and that will turn about that far to lock that in place. So now I have all of the forward things done. I'll go back to the aft end here, slide this into the shift rod coming down from the console, and this is outboard, this part is inboard, so that has to go outboard. And then I won't put this clip on quite yet, and then operate the shift lever to see if it seems to click in the right position for the park, neutral, reverse, etc. So I can hear the clicks of those things going into gear. And if it isn't quite right, then I can take this rod out and give it a twist in order to adjust it forward or aft. I have to do a 180 or a 360 twist, and that will move it counterclockwise. This way is making it longer, so you sort of have to think through which direction you need to adjust it, or you can again adjust it this way. And that is the way that the gear shift shows the right position. So park is actually where the transmission is in park, and where the neutral safety switch thinks it's in park. So once that adjustment is made, then I'll put this clip on, and that'll secure it in place. And at that glorious moment, I'll see if the car actually starts. Thanks for watching. Now check the reverse